Welcome to this episode of
Here we go, Fregeau!
Starring Maria Robertson and Dr. Paul Fregeau.
Hello, and welcome to the third episode of the DPS podcast. Here we go, Fregeau. I'm Maria Robertson, Director of Community Engagement, and joining me is the Superintendent of Decatur Public Schools, Dr. Paul Fregeau. Hello, Paul.
Hey, Maria, how are you today?
I'm doing well, thank you.
I'd like to welcome a special guest,
Oh,
Mr. Matt Fraas, principal of Stephen Decatur Middle School. Welcome, Matt.
Thanks, glad to be here.
Well, as you guys know, the district has safety as one of the top priorities for all of our students. And that being said, many families have been concerned for their students' safety since the merging of our two middle schools, and this has brought up some topics of bullying and fights. Unfortunately, school districts across the country are dealing with these issues. It's not just us. And the National Center of Education Statistics and Bureau of Justice Statistics, nearly 20% of students in the U.S. ages 12 to 18 experience bullying. This is the most common types of bullying are verbal and social. So in today's podcast, we're going to talk about the issue of bullying and fights and go over exactly how DPS tries to combat these issues.
Well, this should be a good conversation. I hope people find it helpful, the information we provide them today.
Okay, so as you guys know, anyone on social media, there's been many rumors circulating that fights happen at Stephen Decatur every day. Can you guys clear this up for us?
Go ahead, Matt. You're here every day.
Yeah, so we have had fights at school this year. There's no denying that. But what typically happens as we've looked at the data is that those are clumped in certain days and that it's not an everyday occurrence.
Okay.
But they are typically happening sort of in flurries. And so we do see where there are days where we've had multiple fights. And it seems like once that's started, then we have our work cut out for us to make sure that we contain the rest of the students from thinking that's an okay solution to their problems.
Have you found any patterns or in the data of when these fights are occurring?
So yeah, the last couple of weeks we've had most of our issues on Mondays.
Okay.
And as we are interviewing students and finding out what's leading to these physical altercations, we find a lot of it is upset coming over from the weekend. Either things that have happened on social media,
Gotcha.
things that may have happened in the community, and then those things are flaring up again at school when they're in this space together.
Okay. Let's chat quickly about what happens after a fight breaks out in school. What is the district's protocol for handling fights?
Well, they first of all make sure the fight stops,
Right.
right? And they got to make sure everybody's safe. And then they just have to go through interviewing the kids and finding out what led to that incident. Is there something, talk with the kids about options that are better than fighting? What other options can they do? And the next time they feel like this approach is needed, and give them some different strategies. And then we look through our code of conduct and we apply whatever discipline applies. But that is very personal to each kid. It's very the rights of the kids and their family is protected by privacy, and so we deal with those on an individual basis.
Yeah, and it's important for us too that we give each kid due process. Those are very emotional moments,
Right.
They're usually not very long lasting, but they're very high emotion, and so we want to make sure that we are separating kids and getting everybody safe. Give them time to de-escalate so that they can talk. We do the investigation and find out what led to this upset. We question other kids that may have been around to witness it, and we then go through and talk with counselors or social workers, administration about, again, what other options kids have. Who are the resources here at school if you're having problems with somebody that you could reach out to other than trying to solve it yourself.
Wonderful. So thanks for that, letting everyone kind of get a visual or hear about how the handling of an investigation of a fight takes place. So thank you. I know that each scenario may be different for every student involved in an altercation, but how does the school building determine each particular student's consequence for their involvement, whether it be initiating the fight or self-defense or, egging each other on or even trying to stop the fight?
That's why, as Mr. Frost mentioned, due process is so important.
Yes.
They have to get everybody's view on what happened. There's the one kid's lens is more than likely way different than the other kid's lens, and the witnesses. So you have to take all those factors into play when you're looking at the code of conduct and what type of consequence should be associated with this behavior. So, as Mr. Fraas said, the due process piece is so key to that.
Right, and one other tool that's been helpful is the camera footage to help kind of verify student stories. So we do, in the interview process, get everybody's perspective as to what happened and why, and then we're able to use the cameras to help support. Again, we don't condone putting hands on anybody at school ever, and we understand self-defense, but we also have to make sure that fighting isn't okay at school. So there are going to be consequences for everybody involved. Again, determining those individual consequences comes down to individual circumstances. So, is this a repeat offense? Is this somebody that was searching out a fight? Is this somebody that was on the receiving end of it? And again, that's what the investigation and the cameras can help us figure out.
I think that's important for parents to know about the due process, because they want to know right away what's taking place and why weren't we notified. So it's important to know that there is that process after these altercations, and we can't share anything with anyone until after all that has been gathered.
And there's another piece of that that's also a lot of times frustrating with parents.
Yep.
Is they want to know what happened to the other child.
Right.
And they can't know what consequence happened to the other kid, and that's a natural tendency of parents.
Right.
And they can sometimes be frustrated about that, but just like the other parent has no right to know what happened to your child, you have no right. All we can tell you is we dealt with it per discipline code of conduct, district policy, and a lot of times parents get really frustrated with that, and we understand it, but we just can't share that information.
Right, and we try to give them as much information as we can about what we figured out in the investigation. We give them some of the tips as to what we found out led to this incident. So are there certain individual, that they need to talk to their student about? Are there, maybe it is a place where something happened. Maybe it's a social media outlet. So we have parents, aware of those things. We also let them know too if we've, found out that their student was instigating the issue or not, just so that they can be aware of, first of all, how thorough we've been in making decisions.
Right.
But also if maybe there's some ways they can help intervene.
That's right. It takes a village. So I know you guys talked about a little bit of the frustration that we may experience from our parents that aren't notified of every incident in the school, and they often think about that it's the district trying to minimize or cover up the fights. So thank you for going over that and explaining some of those protocols. So there are some other parents out there blaming the middle school merge behind the amount of fights happening. When we talked about the middle school academies had divided the student body into smaller class sizes and than their original school, if the fights are happening in smaller class sizes, can the merge be a reason we're seeing the fights? And are we seeing these altercations happening during points of the day where the academies are briefly exposed to each other during lunch periods?
Well, I heard that as we were planning for this. It's been a concern from the very beginning, the merging of the two middle schools. So I understand that, and we're tracking the data. The data does not indicate there's been an increase in incidents. There's actually been a precipitous decrease in incidents when they were separated. Again, we'll continue to monitor this, but the perception is not the reality. But we understand people's concern, and that's why we're monitoring that and making sure we're addressing that if that would happen.
Right, and part of the challenge, I think, that when we look at historical data, we're looking at two different locations.
Right.
Versus now, even if it is less fights, it's all in the same location. So it may seem, again, that the perception is that this is happening more often or it's happening daily. But again, we have not seen that to be the case in the data when we look at the numbers. I think that the times of academic work during the day, we haven't seen that issue. We're dealing with disruptive students, but it hasn't been the physical altercations during class time. So you mentioned earlier, the time when those academies are exposed to each other, and we do see that there are certain points of the day, like lunch or dismissal, where we're having more issues, and so then we keep adjusting procedures and expectations and trying to change our adult behaviors during those times to address and make sure that kids are safe during that period
That's
of the
good
day.
to know. Thanks,
Yes,
Matt.
it's interesting in discussion with the administration here. Arrivals are, because it's staggered and not all at once, we are seeing very little issues at arrival. It's, as Mr. Frost said, at lunch and dismissal. So we're constantly tweaking things to adjust and try to mitigate any of those situations.
Got it. So if there are already students in the school that may not feel safe due to bullying or fights, what services does Stephen Decatur offer for our students?
We have several. So we've got a counselor with each academy that
Okay.
students can go to for help with social issues. There's also social workers in the building. We have multiple social workers that can be another good resource for students that, both of those groups of folks are trained to specifically help students with social issues. And how do I navigate myself? How do I navigate my peers? How do I navigate an upset with a teacher? So those are great resources. We also have the administration in the building is willing to have those conversations with kids or parents that call in. And so we have that as well. We also have our security guards who are in the hallways. So if there's an issue during passing or other parts of the day like lunch or dismissal, those staff are always around as well. So we try to have people available all the time for kids. And the trick is just getting them used to finding those folks for help before trying to solve that problem themselves.
Yes, and parents, a question you may want to be able to ask your student is, who's an adult you trust at Stephen Decatur that you feel comfortable talking to? The next time you're feeling upset, let someone know, and you get to that person. Anybody here's ready to help, and every kid, we would hope, has at least one adult in this building they trust and they can talk to.
Right. So for our students, how does the district deal with the cases of bullying?
Well, first of all, people need to understand bullying is an ongoing, it's over time, it's repeated incidents. One little issue, one little time, and I'm not dismissing that one time, may not rise to the level of bullying. It may be just some disrespectful behavior towards another or something like that. So, but we have a full-blown bullying form that they have to fill out. An investigation has to occur. Once it gets to the level of bullying, we have a very scripted process for our buildings to follow as for regards to bullying, and they work with our student services office as well on that.
Correct. And for those issues that don't rise to a level of bullying because it's not persistent over time, our counselors and social workers have forms that students can fill out to kind of self-refer for help. Say, I had one incident with this student, or our teachers can fill those out on kids too if they are made aware of situations.
Okay.
So there's still an avenue for people to reach out and get help. Students can even suggest that their peers go, if they've heard some rumblings, or, my best buddy's upset, and so I can refer him or her to the counselor for some additional support.
Okay. Can the district do anything to assist students in circumstances where the cases of bullying or fights happen outside of school? And if we can't, what advice would you give to parents?
Outside of school, the advice you can give to parents is be aware when those issues, talk to your kids, have conversations, how your day go. We understand parents are busy. They're either at work or have other commitments, whether it's church or other agencies they might be working with. Communicate with your kids. Encourage them to not bring those issues to school, to try to settle them at home. And if they feel like they need to bring it to school, have them talk to an adult.
That's right.
Don't try to address it themselves. That's what happens. And then words elevate to more physical type interaction, and then it gets to the point where the school has very few options as far as what they can do. If you come to the school and say, I'm really having trouble dealing with Susie or Jim, wherever it may be, we have these folks that Mr. Frost has mentioned that can help you work through those issues and say, I understand you're upset with them wherever, but here we have to have school, we have to educate kids, we have to have a civil environment.
Right.
So if there's a student out there in our listening audience who may not feel safe at school and hasn't told anyone, what words of advice would you have to offer to them?
Speak up. We do everything in our power to keep kids anonymous, but what we're not aware of, we can't address. And so, our biggest ask of students is to let us know. And if there's not a time during the day that you can get one-on-one with an adult, talk to an adult at home and have them call in or email us. Most of the families hopefully have my cell number. They can get in touch with me anytime. So we just ask that kids share what they know, because we want this to be a safe place for them to come. Yeah. We want this to be a place where they can learn. And if they're worried about that other stuff, those things aren't happening. And so as soon as we know about it, we'll address it. And, all the folks we've mentioned so far that are here to support kids will do their best to get those things solved as quickly as possible, so that we can keep kids learning. So we just ask that you share either with the adults at school or with an adult at home so that we can figure out how to solve that problem.
Okay.
And if you have a friend that you know is a student, and you have a friend that is dealing with something, don't assume they've talked to somebody. I've seen in 30-something years of education some huge breakthroughs in assisting students didn't come from them sharing it personally, because they're not comfortable yet sharing it, but a friend is aware and made the right people aware, and we were able to help the student before things got out of hand. So don't assume that your friend has shared their concerns.
Yeah.
Communicate with the adults in the building, or your parent or a trusted adult at home, and then have them call the school and make us aware.
Yeah. I've talked with grandparents, aunts, uncles, neighbors. So all of those folks, are willing to help out as long as we know. And so we just need kids to share what they know.
Gotcha. So anything else that may be right on the top of mind of you guys on this topic?
And I like Facebook and I like Twitter as much as anybody else. But just to ask our parents, if they see something on Facebook that's posted that's concerning, and we understand that, contact central office or contact the building that is mentioned in the concern, and let us address it. Most of the time we know, but if we don't assume we do know,
right.
And don't always believe everything that is shared on social media, and just trust the school district and contact us, and we'll be happy to talk to you. If we're not available then, leave a message. We'll get back with you as soon as possible, or email us. We listen at the website. We listen at dps61.org if all else fails. But don't go to social media for your information about what's going on at school. Sometimes it may not be correct.
Yeah, we also are going to give families a chance to come and ask questions and hear solutions on Wednesday the 25th at 6 o'clock. And so we wanted to just make sure that families are aware of that. We're going to get the word out, again, via social media and calls out to all of our families to let them know. But we want to hear from them, and we want to be able to answer their questions and hear their concerns. So again, if there are things we need to change and address, we will do that based on the feedback from them. So we hope that as many families as possible can join us next Wednesday.
Okay, so that's Wednesday.
Thanks for doing that, Matt.
Yeah. At Stephen Decatur.
Right.
6 o'clock, you said?
Yep.
In the auditorium.
Correct.
All right. Well, I think that concludes this episode of Here We Go, Fregeau. And we appreciate both of you for taking time to answer these questions for the community. If you have any ideas or topics for a future podcast with Dr. Fregeau, please leave a comment or a private message on our Facebook page. Thanks everyone for listening. Have a good day, you guys.
All right, have a great one.